Again, welcome to American Study Council of the Americas for the book launch of Hal Weitzman's book, Latin Lessons. I will introduce Hal. He's a correspondent for the Financial Times, Midwest bureau chief for the Financial Times. But before that, he was a reporter for the Andes in the Financial Times, based in Lima, but traveled to Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, throughout the Andean region. And he's written a very provocative book about how the changes in the global economy, how the commodities boom have affected not only Latin Americans' economy and sense of their own sense of destiny, but also affected U.S. policy. So what we'll do is we'll have Hal speak for about 10-15 minutes about his book, and then we're going to have a discussion with, going from my immediate left, Kristen Degliese, who's the managing director at HSBC, Global Assets at HSBC, and Patricio Navia, who is a master teacher at the New York University and also adjunct professor at the Latin American Studies program at New York University. And I think his proudest achievement yet, he's also on the editorial board of America's Quarterly. So I just wanted to give a shameless plug to the journal that we publish here, America's Quarterly, which just came out 2 weeks ago. But enough about me. Hal, let's talk about your book. Tell us a little bit about the conclusions you have in your book and why it's actually caused a little bit of a kerfluffle within our own members about the meaning of U.S. dominance in the region and the Latin American economic model.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. As they say, enough about me. What do you want to know about me? Well, thanks to the Council of the Americas for hosting me, and thanks to you all for turning up this evening. I want to start with a question. Could it be that for the first time in history, the United States needs Latin America more than Latin America needs the United States? Now, cast your mind back a decade ago, or a little over a decade ago. That question would have seemed absurd. The United States was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, the most powerful country economically, politically, militarily. Why on earth would it need anyone, let alone a continent known for its economic crises, its political instability, for having almost no global clout? Well, how times have changed, and how used we have become to the fact of change. There's an old Jewish joke that I heard probably about 5,000 times when I was growing up, and it's set in Eastern Europe in the 19th century, in a period when borders were changing very rapidly. And the story goes that a woman is pegging up washing in a remote shtetl, and a Cossack soldier rides up, and he declares, "Old woman, from this day forth, this land is no longer Poland. It is Imperial Russia." And then he rides off. And she watches him go, and she says, "Thank God, I couldn't stand another Polish winter." Thank you for laughing. I will pass those laughs on to my father and his father. Like the woman in that story, we've become used to the idea of the tectonic plates of global power and influence shifting beneath our feet. We've become used to the idea that America is going to play a decreasing role in the global political economy in the coming decades. Now, there's something of a debate about whether America is in decline or not, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But it seems clear that if you look ahead 20, 30, 40, 50 years, the global economy is going to be quite different, and the US role in it is going to be smaller. And that's a good thing, because it means that other countries are rising. It means that fewer people in the world are going to be poor. So we should celebrate that. Within the United States, though, it's provoked a forlorn sense of nostalgia. Just look at the titles of some of the best-selling political books of the past year. Books like Republic Lost, The Unmaking of America, That Used to Be Us. That Used to Be Us. What a pathetically sad and forlorn title that is. It sort of reminds me of my wife and me sitting on the couch at home looking at photos of when we were first dating. You know, she turns to me and says, "Oh, you were quite handsome then." That used to be us. Well, I think that Americans are getting bored of this gloominess. There was something very powerful about that Clint Eastwood Super Bowl ad. It's halftime in America. Although somebody pointed out to me that means that America is going to end in 2246 or thereabouts. Maybe it's early in America rather than halftime. But it captured the idea that people want to know what's next. How do we get out of the situation that we're in? And a lot of the debate around that question has been focused on the home front. And of course, that's the ground over which the election is being fought. What is the role of the state in the economy? What is the nature of government? Big, important questions. Much less focus has been on the international dimension. And the question here is, what is America's role in a world where within a few decades it will no longer be top dog? And that's one of the central questions that I was trying to address in writing this book. Now, when the Financial Times sent me to be their Andes correspondent, great title, probably the best title in journalism, in 2004, they sent me to be their Andes correspondent. I would be lying if I said there were great expectations back in London about what I would produce in terms of news. So although I later reported from Venezuela and Chile, I was initially sent out to cover Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. Not exactly the sorts of countries that regularly crop up on the front pages of the newspapers. And I had a very memorable debrief interview with a senior editor at the FT. And he called me into his office. And he said, "You know, this is great. You got Chavez, you got the oil industry." I said, "No, I'm not actually covering Venezuela." He said, "Oh, well, you know, you got the FARC, you got the war on drugs." I said, "No, I'm not actually covering Colombia." He said, "Oh, well, what are you doing?" I said, "What are we sending you out there to do?" I said, "I'm covering Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador." And there was a long pause. And then he said, "Well, in that case, go and get a suntan." And I took that advice to heart. But actually, it turned out to be an incredibly interesting and exciting time. So 6 months after I got there, the government was pushed out in Ecuador. And 6 months after that, the government was pushed out in Bolivia. And Evo Morales, a fiery, indigenous, nationalist, left-wing, radical president, was elected. And within 6 months, he had nationalized the gas industry. And 6 months after that, Rafael Correa, another radical leftist, allied with Hugo Chavez, the Venezuelan president, Correa was elected in Ecuador. So it turned out to be an incredibly interesting time, and actually I did end up getting a few stories on the front page after all. And after going through all this wonderful experience for 3 years, I said to myself, you've got to write a book about this. But it wasn't until the FT sent me to Chicago, where I'm currently the correspondent, that the book really came together. because I came from a continent that was booming to a country where